Welcome to Influencing Magic, a Daps Magic podcast exploring how members of the Disney and creative communities became influential in their different roles.
We are interviewing and sharing experiences of an ever-growing influencing market, drawing from Daps Magic's nearly 20-year history within the Disney community. Come with us as we share what it takes to be a successful Disney influencer, both professionally and personally.
While also seeking to influence kindness along the way. I'm Mr. Daps.
I'm Annie.
And we're excited that you're here.
And you are listening to episode 2.
Which is also kind of like episode 1.
Kind of.
Because the first one was like intro episode number 1, and now this is like real episode number 1. We haven't planned this out. It's fine. It's going to be episode 2, though.
It makes our numbers look better to have 2 episodes.
No, we have 2.
Okay, but this one is special because in this episode, we're going to be talking about you and your origin story.
Because I love that.
Cool. Origin stories are super fun, though.
They are. I just don't do well talking about myself pretty often.
Okay.
So I will.
So before we get into that, then.
Yes.
So you can calm down, take a deep breath.
Deep breath.
Don't get nervous. What's new with you? What's going on?
This is still a big new thing as we're looking at it, and the fact that we've made it to number 2, I think, is very cool. And it's kind of always that. I feel like new things pop up every day of like, this is technology new things, or we're working on a big project that's close to being revealed for the website, and just making sure things work the best they can, and then also cover the news while we're like trying to make everything else work, and then it's really just like that constant. I almost want to say it's a juggling act of like, here's what's happening every day that you have zero control on, like whatever announcement came out. So that's the stuff we try to keep on, and there's a lot.
When you say we, you mean Daps Magic,
Daps Magic, yeah.
Okay.
And for most of it, 80%, 90% of that written content comes through my desk. And then there's the like, this is how you keep a website running, and this is how you keep web shows running, and this is how you keep a podcast running. And so there's a lot of like behind the scenes technical stuff that have, like we have Chris that helps us with the behind the scenes stuff on the website and keeping us running and coming up with ways to make my crazy ideas work. And then we have another company that we work with. Yeah, quite often. And then we have another company that we work with that helps us keep things going fast and works with some of our advertising and stuff like that. So it's a lot of like, at that point you're becoming more of the administrator and the leader as opposed to the actual doer. And so it's kind of an interesting, I don't know, there's always lots going on.
So you've basically been the man of many hats, but actually the same hat.
But they're all trilbies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That actually would be really cool if you had like a whole collection of them.
I do.
Little side note. Really?
Yeah.
Why have I never seen them?
Because they're all in different places.
Oh.
Like, because you have to put them in places where they're not going to get crushed. And so it's not like they're all lined up, but I definitely have multiple.
We should put it behind. You can get one of those
that actually is a fun idea.
Like little clip things.
It could go right in the middle here.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Well, they kind of need to be out. Yeah, we'll have to think of that.
Maybe.
I like that idea.
Okay, blue sky. This is super random and a little bit off topic. One day you should design your own.
I just did in my head.
Okay, but actually one day. It doesn't help if it's in your head.
No, I could probably make it right
that would be
after
super
we recorded this. I could go, like, I need, I've got the 4x4.
No, I'm talking about an actual hat. You should design your own hat.
I thought you meant a hat rack. I'm like, yeah, I got this great idea. And they're going to go from the top to the bottom right there. And you'll see hats every week. It's fun.
That's great.
Yeah, it would be cool to design my own trilby. I don't know how that works, but yeah.
We'll research it.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a Skillshare class
So
somewhere.
what's new with you? Is that what's next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for asking, Mr. Daps.
You're welcome.
What is new with me? I basically have been kind of how you've been relaunching Daps Magic. I'm an illustrator on the side. You will learn about that in future episodes. But I've been working a lot on various technological advances for myself with website stuff and rebranding, and it's been fun. So kind of what we've been working on here has also melted into also what I'm doing.
Well, I think that's the great thing is when you do stuff like that, creativity spurs on more creativity. And so it kind of is like throwing gas on the fire where
yes,
and especially like when we randomly text and things just start exploding, like I feel like that helps both.
Yeah. We randomly, so we have multiple text threads, some with Caitlyn, who's also kind of helping us with all of this, but we have one for ourselves. And how many texts do you think we've sent of like, hey, I have an idea, dot dot dot.
And really, that just goes between the two of us to keep everybody else sane.
Because then the phone blows up, and then we feel bad that we're blowing up everybody else's phone. But
usually, if it's in a group chat, then it's just the two of us, and you hear nothing from anybody else, and it's like, oh,
crickets.
Sorry, guys.
It's fine. So yeah, that's what's been going on. Nothing super exciting yet, but we can get into that in another episode. But Are you ready?
Sure.
To talk about you?
Why not?
Okay, drum roll, Mr. Daps.
Yes, that's me.
We would love to know your origin story. How did Daps Magic come about? Like, what started the dream of having your own website that covered Disney things?
Well, the funny thing is, there was never a dream. It was very practical. So I was in a Yahoo group in 2004, and I just wasn't super impressed with how this particular group treated people. And I didn't feel like it was super nice, and it wasn't kind in any way. And there was a certain incident that happened, and I emailed the moderator, and I'd just been out here a year or two, maybe 3, from moving to California from Minnesota. And so I was definitely a little bit wet behind the ears. And I'm just like, hey, saw this happen in the group. Is that normal? Like, did I miss something? And the response was like, well, we just don't feel like that's the appropriate behavior for annual pass holders. And I just was like, oh, that's so demeaning and not nice in any way. And I was like, okay, thank you. And so I definitely emailed the 2 people that were, I would say, bullied at some level, and said, hey, you want to start our own Yahoo group? So we started our own Yahoo group, and that was back in 2004. And my little brother was like, hey, you should start a website too. And this was all in April of 2004, so it's actually coming up fairly soon. And so we made a website. It looked terrible. It was like a splash page, basically, that had lots of Disney graphics and Disney fonts, and said a lot, but not really anything also. And then I think it was kind of this natural evolution of, well, we have this group, we're talking about Disney news, and we have the website that's really just sitting there, and people can look at it, and it feeds into the group. And so then it kind of just became this natural evolution of like, well, what's next? Well, let's talk about what we like on the website now, and start adding articles and just kind of random. Like, there wasn't a plan in any regard at that point. And so that led to news being shared on the website. And then kind of that was like, well, we have this website. What else could we do with it? And so then like Caption of the Week came up, and we have that back now.
I was just going to say, which they started again on the Facebook group?
They're actually on the site too.
Okay.
Like, I just feed from the Facebook group. Like, I show it there.
Gotcha.
So you basically just go on, and I post a picture, and people put captions, and then they vote on the captions. Whatever caption gets the most votes wins and becomes the permanent caption for that picture. And it's very fun to see people be creative. And then there was also, we did a no-name game, which was a virtual scavenger hunt in the parks. And
that's fun.
And that might come back at some point too. That's one of the things we have in the works. But we basically just kind of like, this sounds fun, let's do it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what we're doing here. And
story of our life. This sounds fun, let's do it.
It is. It's very much a pursuit of passion, I guess you could say. Because it was like, well, this is needed. Like, the initial need was, we need a nice place to geek out about Disney stuff together. And then that led to like, well, we need more content to geek out about, because it seems like it's hard to find. And then it's like, well, we also want to do stuff together. So then the meets and the no-name games and the Caption of the Week, and recognizing that most of the population of the world will never get to do what we do on a regular basis. Like, we go to Disneyland on a regular basis. We go to Walt Disney World on a semi-regular basis. Like, we get to experience things that most people will only see through a screen or a book or maybe a podcast. Who knows? And so it was kind of one of those things of always recognizing that we have this gift here that we can share with people that aren't just here. And some of the people, like a lot of people in that are connected with Daps Magic are here. So we can do stuff together. But there's even more that are, like, if you saw the stats from, like, where traffic comes from on Daps, it's not just California. It's not just the United States. You know, we get a lot from Europe. We get a lot from Asia. It's very fun to see the people that are engaging with us from around the globe. And so that started there. I mean, gradually it just kind of kept growing. And there really wasn't any big, like, hey, we're going to make it into this thing. And we're not, like, there at this point, especially, there was no thought of, like, hey, let's make this brand that people will know and recognize. And
did you guys have a name for it at that point?
Yeah, we had a name within days. Like,
was it the Daps Magic, or was it
was
something
Daps
else?
for Disney Magic originally, and we had that. We still have that URL, and it was kind of one of those things where when we started adding news and sending people to the site, Daps for Disney Magic takes a long time to say and to spell out and to write.
Yeah.
So we just shortened it, and we're like, Daps Magic, it's good. and that was the first site redesign where it got the kind of eBay looking logo that we've had forever. That kind of is the one that until now
it does
was the
look
one.
Like eBay.
I didn't realize it till like 5 years later.
I don't think I ever put that together.
Somebody said it in, like, I want to say it was like 2012 or 13 or something. Like, it was kind of in the middle of our first big rebrand. And I was like, huh. And, like, you never can unsee it after that. But it's still on a ton of our videos and stuff. And we did have an original YouTube channel that got lost somehow through the randomness of the interwebs. And that started in 2005, I want to say. And the current one we have was actually the way we started it was there was a news YouTube, and then there was Mr. Daps YouTube. And Mr. Daps YouTube was basically anything I found interesting I would put on this YouTube. So the very first video is, I think it was Ragtime Robert playing up on Jolly Holiday, that stage they used to have up there in like 2007 or something. And might be a duet with Robbie. I'd have to go back and look. But it's just kind of one of those things that's what I spent my time in. I recorded it, put it up, and then College Band came along, recorded that, put it up. Candlelight.
So you started doing College Band way back in
2007.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so, but there was never this thought of like, hey, we're going to create this thing. It was just kind of like, this works, this is fun, let's go. And then as it grew, really it was probably, well, it was 2010. We were realizing that we loved covering Disney stuff, but we wanted to cover other stuff too. And it was kind of this like wall that we were hitting against, because it just, like, from a branding standpoint, we're like, hey, we really want to talk about Star Wars and Marvel and stuff that Disney doesn't own. And so we started.
Little did we know.
Exactly. So we started Geeks Corner, and Johnny and I started it and really had no clue what it would become, or that 651 episodes now.
Wow.
Later.
It was just like on your back porch too, right?
Yeah. And no microphones. It was just a camera literally set up in the doorway. And it's weird how much we've evolved through the years technologically. But
that's pretty cool though, to think about that and think like you can start with whatever you have.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't have to have all of this big studio. Like, yes, there's a Daps studio, but you started on your porch. Like you just said,
and
no
honestly,
mics, nothing. Like, I remember seeing weather outside behind you guys.
Yeah.
They had no cover whatsoever.
Or the dumpster diver. There was one of those. Yeah, it was great. I loved it back then.
Everything is content.
It's true. And honestly, we enjoy watching it just as much as the people that watch it enjoy.
Yeah.
Like, we love finding these random things that happen in the background of videos like that. And then it was kind of always while there may not have been a huge plan for anything at the time, it was always, this is what we've got, how can we do it better? And so I would say if there's one consistent thing that's always been true for me personally, but also with Daps, is like, hey, we're here, how do we get to the next step, whatever that is going to be? And what was good about this, what could have been improved, and what will make it better is something I tend to think about with anything we do. And every
Did you guys write that down? Can you repeat it one more time?
What was good about this? What could have been improved, and what can we do better? I don't know if I'll remember that. I just made that up, but that's
You should have just gone with them and like, yeah, it's been my motto
because I
since.
come up with it probably was similar to that. Like it's those three things
Yeah.
that get said in different ways each time. But it was always just like, hey, at some point we should get microphones or lights. Like lights were a big deal for us when we got those for our first time, and trying to find a good location to film that wasn't as noisy and background, and then trying to figure out how do you do this with a secondhand soundboard. And like we've been through the rigmarole with Geeks Corner, and then like, oh, we're going on vacation, how do we keep doing it when we're on vacation? So I filmed in Jamaica, I filmed in Mexico, I filmed in
cool.
Walt Disney World twice, 3 times, maybe more than that actually. No, probably like 5 times now. But what's come out of that though is, what has it been, 13 years now, or coming up on 13 years in October
For Geeks Corner.
Yeah, we haven't missed a single show any week in 13 years.
Wow.
And I think that consistency is really, and it surprises me because you meet random people here and there and all over the place, and it always baffles me. They're like, "Oh yeah, I saw your show," and I'm like, "Huh, okay, that's great. I hope you liked it." But and hopefully they'd say the same about this, but or listen to it. But so then we were just like, along the way we got invited to press events, and that wasn't anything we actually ever planned on. It just was kind of random email showed up from Disney, said, "Hey, do you want to come to this thing?" And we're like, "Sure." And
what year was that?
I don't remember. It was somewhere between 2006 and 2010.
Okay.
It was kind of, it must have been, I don't remember.
But you guys, so basically why I'm asking that is to show that you had been working towards something, and that was about 5-6 years.
Yeah.
Would you say
4 to 6? Yeah.
4 to 6 years. So it's not something that happened
overnight.
Immediately.
No.
And even at that point, Disney wasn't really using influencers to show things, right?
No, because it was websites then, and so there was a handful of us, and we're all still friends to this day, that kind of, once it got going, it was the same group at a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And they're great people, and it's just always been fun to do these things together. And then once, I think it did start mainly with Disneyland, and then also with like home entertainment releases, DVDs and stuff. And then it grew into D23 Expo, and I think we've covered every one of the D23 Expos. And then we, you just kind of, as you do more presents itself.
Yeah.
And so you kind of just keep going with things. And then I'm trying to think what came next. Then I think fast forward, like we were getting Geeks going, we were getting kind of a rhythm for news, a rhythm for we did the podcast for a few years,
Mm-hmm.
Dapscast, and that was a lot
really
of fun. And so it was kind of always been almost like an experimental, like a test tube in some ways, of like, hey, let's test this out, let's test that out, and some things work and some things don't, and that's okay. And some things work for a while and then they don't work for a while.
Right.
And like it's interesting to me because you think of like Geeks Corner and Dapscast were in some ways kind of similar, different formats, but there was that conversational aspect of it, and there was it was another show, I guess is a good way to say it. But Geeks Corner was so ridiculously consistent,
mm-hmm.
and Dapscast, we kind of did it when we could.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting to me that the one we were ridiculously consistent on is the one that continued moving forward.
Right.
And
well, and it's also harder. I think we had 4 or 5 people.
Sometimes 5, yeah.
Yeah. On a podcast, and that's hard.
Well, and I think the lesson to that though is keep it simple.
Yeah.
And I think so often with websites, I mean, I have to tell myself this all the time, is like it's very easy to build things up too many layers
mm-hmm.
and too many people and get it too convoluted probably. But I mean, that's what ends up happening. But if you can do like the simple part pretty good,
mm-hmm.
and then keep improving on that, then you get to a point where, like, think of the first episode of Geeks Corner, how uncomfortable we were on camera, how bad we sounded, how the light was terrible. Like, and we're still here, but that step almost 13 years ago led to us last time recording the first Influencing Magic that sounded great, that has lights, the camera works, like we're not sitting on a porch.
Right. For those of you that don't know, this section of the studio that we're using for Influencing the Magic is literally just a camera rotation.
Yeah.
From the Geeks Corner set, which is to my right.
Yeah.
So it is because of Geeks Corner.
Yeah, we can do all these other things.
And because of Daps Magic is why
we learned
Geeks
all the
Corner,
hard lessons.
Yeah. So I mean, just the fact of you explaining that, I think that's really cool to see the progression of various forms of Daps Magic moving on and now to the future.
Yeah.
With this as our latest endeavor. And you've been working really hard on the website.
Yeah.
In the last couple months of just like, you did a huge rebrand, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's probably the next step is like you have all of these things coming and going and working. And then our buddy Drew messages me last spring, actually texted me, and he's like, "Hey, I'd like to take a run at your logo." And I'm like, "Okay." Like, and I honestly had zero expectations, and I think that was the extent of the conversation. Like, it was literally, "Hey, I want to play with your logo." I said, "Okay." We go on to other stuff. Don't think about it for months. Then I think it was in July or June or something like that. I think it was July. He sends me this keynote that's like 26 pages long.
It was so good.
It's I reference it still, and it literally went into, here's the new logo, here's all the variations, here's the colors that go with it, here's the thought process behind it, here's the variations we could make for you that will be coming, and you'll see it on our store at some point with different versions for times of year and different stylistic colors and all sorts of stuff. And my favorite part, though, is the end, where it was basically like, "Thank you, I hope you like it," or something.
Aww.
And it was very, I was like, "Drew, what do you mean by this?" He's like, "Well, I didn't know if you'd like it."
It's like, it is so professional. I was
amazing.
blown away. You sent it to me and you're like, "Hey, did you see this stuff?" And I was like, "No." And you said, "Let me send you this presentation." And I was like, "Oh, there's a presentation?"
Yeah.
And wow.
It's amazing.
Good job, Drew.
But
does Drew have, speaking of, does he have social media?
He does. You can look him up for Galactic Surplus, and we can put that in the show notes. And the great thing is I love how he described the new logo. Is like, he wanted it to be whimsical to kind of match with our personalities, but also look professional on a business card.
It looks good.
And I feel like that's exactly what we are. Is we are professional, but we still know how to have fun. And I think there's a balance to be had with that sometimes gets lost one way or the other in different organizations, where it's like, oh, they're way too professional and they take themselves too seriously.
Right.
And then there's the other end of things where it's like, oh, you don't take anything seriously. And so then there's no gravitas or weight to what they say. And so I think we try to keep that balance of like,
yeah.
I like to say that Daps is very much run like the Muppets, where it's like we have so many random and different people and personalities and lifestyles and you name it. Like, we're a very eclectic group is a good word.
That's exactly the word that I was going to say, was eclectic.
And everybody has their own ideas. Everybody's running 100 miles a minute. And I often, my friend Deb actually was the one that pointed this out probably over 10 years ago. And she's like, "Yeah, you guys are basically the Muppets. You're in the middle trying to pull everybody together to create this show."
Wearing the green.
Yeah.
For those of you that can't see it on the podcast, Mr. Daps is wearing an all-green sweater and a green and blue bow tie.
From my friend Jenny. But yeah, that's funny that I didn't even mean to do that. But she was she's like, you're kind of in Kermit, where you're trying to just help everybody come together to create this really awesome thing that no one of you could create by themselves. And so that's kind of something I've always kept in the back of the mind, is to embrace the differences, embrace the eclectic ideas, even when sometimes they seem completely ridiculous, because you never know when the most ridiculous idea might end up being the best idea. And it's generally a good idea to look for the best. But so we rebranded last summer, and now it's kind of launching off into this new well, we kind of did a double rebrand
Mm-hmm.
because we got the new logo, and then we've always struggled since they changed the program at Disneyland from Magic or Disneyland annual pass holders to Magic Key, and traditionally DAPS stood for Disney annual pass holders
Mm-hmm.
until there weren't any more Disneyland annual pass holders.
R.I.P.
And then and I was like, well, I'm still a pass holder at Walt Disney World, so technically it still works.
It totally works.
Yeah. But I also have answered that question more and more and more. And I'm like, I don't actually like my answer. Like, it was kind of one of those things in the back of my head. I was like, I think we could do better than this. And looking for how can we better.
Mm-hmm.
And so then over Christmas, my parents were visiting, and Dad and I was kind of talking to Dad back and forth about
Dads
this.
are great for advice.
Yeah. And he's like, well, what about Disney and positive stuff? I'm like, done. He's like, well, that's the first one I came up with. Do you want any others? I'm like, no, that works. And so that really led into a rebrand of the rebrand, like not from a looks and aesthetic standpoint, but kind of a purpose thing of what Daps is focusing on now. And
Your
it really,
why.
yeah,
The why of Daps Magic.
yeah, it's really now it's so much more than just Disney stuff or Star Wars or Marvel or anything. We can cover anything as long as it's Disney and positive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might see puppy videos. You might see like it's stuff that's going to make the world a better place as we share it and as we cover it. And that doesn't mean that all the time it's going to be happy stuff.
Right.
Because we still are a news organization.
Yeah, and you also need a good balance on things. It's more an uplifting positive versus forcing positivity on things that
exactly. And it's recognizing that you can approach difficult things in a positive way. And that doesn't mean Pollyanna. It means being maybe
it's almost having, like constructive.
Yes, it's having constructive criticism instead of ripping someone apart and making it personal. And it's disagreeing without being disagreeable. It's having conversations that everybody feels valued, that they have dignity, they feel respected, and you can agree to disagree even on things that you may not think you should agree to disagree on, but you can still treat people with respect because then you have something to build on. And if you don't have anything to build on, then you can't influence anything. And then no change happens at all because people just get more and more locked into their positions or whatever. So it's really trying to build an environment where people can connect, the community can grow, they can embrace what's going on, and then also influence positive change. I
think that's awesome.
Is that good for what's going on in the future?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, totally.
I was like, because it's, and there's more mechanisms and tools that we'll be releasing soon that will help with that also, but they're not done yet.
Wow, that's a really good plug for what we're doing right now. That wrapped up really nicely.
Oh, good.
Okay, so my next question.
Oh, there's another one.
Yes.
Okay.
So that was kind of like your start.
Question one. Okay.
From beginning to bringing us to the present day.
Yes.
And this now spans, like we said, nearly 20 years. Yeah. So you said you started in 2005? 2004. So we're
basically
going on 19 years.
A year and a month from 20.
That's amazing. Okay. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned within that 19 years of working on something? Like, it could be flops. It could be what not to do. Like, is there anything that you're just like, oh, that didn't go as well as I thought? But a lesson was learned and you used that to move forward.
Yeah. Multiples. I think one of them I kind of alluded to already, and that's keeping things simple. If you can do something simple well, it's always better than doing something massive poorly. And so I think that's something that we learned the hard way over and over and over again, because the original Daps was actually a lot like WordPress, but we did it by hand. And in hindsight, if I could have, like, I didn't know anything about starting a website, or like, I could barely Google in 2004, and it's very weird how far we've come. But you think of how many things in life don't happen because we've overcomplicated them, or we've added too much, and then it's too expensive, it's too much effort, it's too much time. It's like, well, maybe if you can just get that one thing done right,
Mm-hmm.
then you can move on to the next thing and do it right. And
Creates that avalanche kind of,
yeah, and so
or snowball.
yeah,
Do we want an avalanche? Maybe we don't want an
snowball would be
avalanche.
better. Yeah.
Snowball.
Um, but it's kind of it's very much like learning a musical instrument where you learn the basics first and then you go on to the next level, and you can't just jump into playing
Right.
amazing stuff. And but it's kind of been one of those things where it's like, hey, let's get this done right. So like we haven't expanded and covered, like I've been asked for years, like, hey, can we cover Universal? I'm like, maybe at some point,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to keep focusing on covering what we do cover now and do that well.
Yeah.
And then if the right people and the right staffing and the right environment as a team is in place, that I feel like, hey, we can cover this without breaking anybody
Right.
and we can cover it well, then I'm like, oh yeah, let's do it. But
Mm-hmm.
until we get to that point, probably won't happen. And it, it'd be fun, like covering. And we've had, and this is not to say that we don't cover Universal at all. We're just not,
We're not there yet.
we're not all in on it, and we're not asking to go to press events and stuff like that, because we're keeping our focus where the main thing is, which is Disney. Like that's always where things start. And so I would say that's the first lesson. Second lesson is, well, it kind of goes with it, is don't overextend yourself.
Yeah.
Just because, and that could be technologically, that could be coverage wise, that could be just making time, like time wise, I guess, also for getting things together, to get things posted, to get things whatever. It's, yeah, they really do go hand in hand as I'm thinking about it. It's like if you can keep things tight, then you're in a good place. The other thing I think to recognize is there's seasons for everything. And that was kind of a hard lesson to learn. Is I think the most obvious one is Johnny doesn't even live in the state anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and he's off happily living his happily ever after, and that's a great thing. And his happily ever after did not involve continuing to be on Geeks Corner after 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
which was very appropriate, because why was he Johnny 5? Because he's done it for 5 years. But that was kind of one of those things where it was the first time where I really was like, huh, it's okay. Like Geeks Corner changed, Daps environment changed, and it's a completely different organization than it was in 2015. But that's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you stay the same, you're gonna die anyway. So
Yeah.
it kind of was a good kick in the butt to change things up and to try different things. And honestly, it the evolution of the show went kind of in a way that was more of my vision anyway, of like Johnny is definitely the entertainer, and I am more of a moderator slash, like, I like to have conversations more. And so it was kind of a good, like in hindsight, it was like, oh, that was a good transition. And we've had people come and go through the years and come back sometimes, and that are on the team. And I think that's an okay thing too, to recognize that, life goes up and down, and that's an okay thing, and to embrace the seasons of life for the organization, as opposed to thinking that it's the end of the world. And
Right.
Change is a good thing.
It is a good thing. So if somebody, a little bit of an advice question. So if somebody is in that season of life where they've been working on something, and for whatever reason something's not working, or they've just hit a really low part of whatever their endeavor is, what advice would you give somebody?
That's a good question, because I think it changes based on what table you're sitting at or what chair you're sitting at. So, my chair here is as the founder in, like, I run Daps Magic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got a different ball in the game than other people do with Daps. And so if it were my baby, like, let's say this is something that you've basically built and you're leading, I would give a different answer than if it's I'm part of a team.
Okay.
So if it's me, and let's just say it's a rough period, and like nothing's going right. The website's broken. Can't get my microphones to work. Can't get the cameras to work. Can't get, like, everything's going wrong on Daps. And we've had these seasons. So it's a good. Then you have to go down to, why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, the why has to be bigger than the why not. And so I can think of many times, especially when we've gone through different hosts. Like, I'm very much a creature of habit, which is weird because I'm also creative. But I very much like my day to start the same way. I like my shows to be structured in a similar way until I want to mess with it.
Yeah.
But I like to build systems and make them work in a certain way. And so there was a couple years kind of in the end of Johnny into, I'm just using Geeks Corner because it's an easy analogy that people have seen. But there was,
shameless plug number 592.
well, it doesn't help that I'm looking at it either. I just realized, like, I'm just feeding
It's
into
fine,
myself.
It's fine.
But it's but it when we're going through the kind of figuring out what 2.0 of Geeks Corner was going to look like and who was going to be on it, and like, it was very much a rocky time, and trying to figure out technology at the time, and trying to figure out, like, there was a lot of things going on that it would have been very easy just to be like, hey, you know what, this is too much, let's pull the plug. And at the end of the day, I sat in my chair and I was kind of like, you know what, this is a rough season and it sucks, and the website's broken, the show's broken, there's not a whole lot working right now. And I think we also had gone through a major, like, break, like the site had broken also, like,
Oh, yeah.
like, and so there was a huge database issue that we were dealing with all at the same time, and something down in my gut said, no, what, something better is coming with this, and this is the path we're going to take to do it. And part of it was that I was recognizing, this is why I do it. Like, we make people smile on a weekly basis. We have people that have watched since week one that are great friends, and then also just recognizing that what we do is unique, and that was a dream that I wasn't willing to give up on yet, and I didn't have to, because I didn't have all my eggs in that basket either, which I think is a good.
That's actually really good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if this had been the only thing I'd been doing at the time, then I probably would have been like, yeah, this might be done. But because I diversified, like, income streams, like, Daps operated on a loss for years. and that was fine, because it's like, oh, well, I have this business over here, and I'm working over here, and I'm consulting over here. And so I've always made sure to make more than one income stream coming in, so that if one goes
Which is
bad,
good life advice in general, not just in the creative
Walt Disney
side.
advice.
Oh, really?
Yes, Walt Disney with his movies. Like, there's this great, actually, it was in the old One Man's Dream show that used to be in the was the Opera House, and then they had it also at, no, it wasn't Opera House. It was in where Turtle Talk is now, the animation building.
Oh, okay.
It was they had the tour in the Opera House where you could look at his office and stuff. But it's there, and then they also have it at Hollywood Studios. And he talks about how he would have all of these different things happening, and if one didn't work, the other one could.
Yeah.
And he called it diversifying the business, which is why he got into live action.
Which is why the parks are the mainstay of the company right now.
yeah. And it's good that they are.
Yeah.
Because that makes me happy. But it's one of those things where I didn't have all the eggs in one basket, so when it was going poorly, it wasn't sinking the ship. And so in that case, if you have the way to do it, if it's not going to kill you, and like, you have that why that's bigger than your why not, like, I believe in this, that level, then you keep going forward.
Mm-hmm.
If you're getting up in the morning and dreading it, like, and that's one thing I would say with Daps from day one, is I've never had a day, and it probably would be the last day, where I've gotten up and like, oh, I hate doing Daps, or I hate Daps, or like, there's never been that dread of like, oh, I have to do this. It's, maybe there's an article I don't want to write.
Yeah.
But that's very different than what you do being something that you dread doing in the morning. And I think that's a huge gift. But if if those things all line up, keep going. Uh, if you're dreading it, if you find yourself wishing for something else all the time and it's yours, it's like, well, then why would you keep it?
Yeah.
Like, and if you're finding yourself beat down by it instead of uplifted by it, like, I would say that's definitely something to start considering. And that's kind of when I'm starting to pivot into, if you're on a team, if you're doing something else also, it's like, at the end of the day, yes, there's sacrifice for everything. Like, there's never anything you do where every day is great.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we do what we like to do.
Yeah.
And we have good days and we have bad days. And that's fine. But we do recognize that we like what we do better than we dislike the parts that we don't like of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And, like doing podcasts and shows and covering things in the parks and taking pictures and all of that stuff and creating stuff is way more fun than figuring out why a database isn't working.
Yeah.
Or, whatever. And that's fine. But you kind of have to do that balance of, like, is my why big enough to keep me going? And do I like the people I'm around? Do I like the process of what I'm doing? And then if you don't, if you're just kind of going and you're at that dead end of like, no, I don't like it. I don't know why I'm doing it. This is not moving me towards where I want to be in life or what I want to do in life. Then you have to start plotting, basically, of like, what would get me there. And I wouldn't do any of this fast. Like,
oh,
and I think,
no, definitely
I
not.
think that's the trick, is everybody always like, oh, in a month or a year, and nothing happens that fast.
Do these 10 steps, and in a week you're gonna have 5 million followers of
right.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. And I think so much of success is taking the baby steps every day and continuing to move. Maybe you're working at Starbucks and you really want to be a professional musician.
Mm-hmm.
That's perfect. Starbucks is very flexible with stuff. You can get your benefits
And they'll
and get
pay
your
for schooling. That's a
and they'll
great
pay-
option.
Exactly. But it's recognizing that quite often the path to where you want to be is not from just straight over. Like, there's no such thing
Right.
as, like, you have to go through the valleys and around the mountains or over the mountains. And sometimes that means doing the things that aren't so fun, recognizing that they have a bigger benefit to get you to where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so then if you're at that point where you're like, hey, I'm here, I can't stand to be here anymore, don't go in and quit the next day. That's where you start talking to the people that have been more successful in the area that you want to go to. Or you listen to something like this as we talk to someone who, I don't know what they do. Maybe they run entertainment somewhere, and
Mm-hmm.
they're talking about, hey, I was a dancer and I broke my ankle, and this is how I overcame that, and today I run entertainment. I'm making up a story here, but it'd be great if it existed, and we'd love to have you on.
And I
if
actually
you're
have
that
an
person.
idea of
Oh,
maybe
perfect.
who would fit that.
But it's recognizing that there's never, like, I can't think of anybody that when they were 12, they're like, hey, I want to do this one thing, and then they just went straight and they did it 10 years later or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it happens. It does happen, but that's
not
very
that
few and
frequently,
far
right?
between. Yeah.
And I wanted to be a professional musician. Growing up, I did the classes. I play dozens of instruments. Did it. Discovered I didn't really like it. Like, I love music, and I still am very active with music and have worked in the music industry, but it wasn't the life passion that I thought it was going to be as I was going through high school and college. And that's okay to learn also. And so I had to have that decision. And I remember distinctly finishing conducting a professional orchestra in choir for Handel's Messiah, and looking around as they were all going back to their families. And I was like, oh, I work like 80 hours a week. Like, I don't think I want this life. Like, I want to have a life with people, not just a life with music notes and the people that are in my orchestra. And so it changed the perspective of what I wanted and what my why was. And, it was literally 2 or 3 years later that Daps was born. And really, you don't know what the path is going to be to these things. And so I think sometimes you have to, like, just kind of suck it up and be like, all right, I'm doing the Starbucks job, or I'm doing
Yeah, you do what you need to do.
I reffed soccer for several years. Like, I've done lots of weird and not necessarily overly fun jobs through the years, but each one taught me something that I could use doing what I did want to do. And so I think if you can come up with that plan with somebody that you trust, that is successful also, like that's another word of advice I would say is never take advice from someone who's not as successful as you are. Because
Yeah.
And people love to give advice all the time. Like,
It's true.
doesn't mean it's good advice.
You don't always have to take it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But look to who you're getting advice from. Like, look to the people that have been where you want to go and ask them how they got there. And then see if that's like, are you willing to pay that price to do whatever it is that they took? Because I guarantee it's probably not as easy as you think it is.
Yeah. No, that's good. And going off of that is kind of our conclusion question to your origin story. Going forward.
Yes.
You've talked about the rebrand of Daps.
Yes.
You've talked about doing the website and just like launching new things, launching this new podcast.
Yep.
Going forward, are there certain steps that you are taking, like game plans, that could be relatable to other people that may be launching something new in their life? Is there something that you can,
I think,
words of advice that would help that?
Yeah, I think honestly, we could use influencing magic as a really good example. Is there's always kind of a natural progression for how successful things grow. And we are doing it in the right path. It hasn't been nearly as fast, I think, as either of us want it to be. But it starts with an idea or a dream. Then you hit that idea around. Like, you have to throw it around a bit, and you have to like test it on people and
let it simmer.
Yeah. And does this still seem like a good idea when we're throwing things around? And do we get feedback that says maybe it's not? Like, there's a risk involved of being shot down on these things, and that's fine. And so I think that was a really good foundation for this that we did. Is the idea came first, then we really vetted the idea. Like, is this actually a good idea?
We brought in peers, like you were saying.
We brought in peers, and then we also brought in people completely unrelated to anything. Just hey, this is what we're doing. What do you think? And mainly just to get people that wouldn't have weren't trying to be nice to us. Right.
An honest, raw opinion.
Yeah.
Basically.
And we got some really honest, raw opinions from it, and that was good. And then from there, this is still just an idea at this point. Then we kind of went into the next step of defining it more and branding it and figuring out this is what it actually is going to look like and going to be. And that took a lot of going back and forth too. And then from there, it was really like, that's just coming up with a name and a mission statement. I think a mission statement's always a good idea, because then it keeps you on track for where you're going and what you're going to hear. And you're going to hear basically our mission statement every podcast, right?
Every intro. Yeah.
And like, we're defining, this is what we do. Like, we're talking with Disney and creative people that have been successful and helping you do the same. And then from there, we were able to come up with a name. We were come up with a structure. We were able to come up with, and that went back and forth too. Like, at every step of this, we really did kind of throw things back and forth and really make sure they made sense, made sure they sounded fun, make sure it's something that we felt like we could do on a continuing basis. And then once we had all of that, then we got to do some of the fun stuff of like, this is what the look and feel is going to look like, and this is the setup for the set, and all of that kind
doing
of fun
artwork.
Yeah. Which I think is the fun part, coming up with a theme song. And then it's actually, you've done all of this prep work, and like, cooking is a great example of you get everything set up ahead of time, and hopefully you've come up with a good recipe or found a good recipe for success first, and you get all of this stuff done, and then you actually have to follow this plan. And so this is where so much of our success will come down to, do we implement the plan we have, i.e. get good guests with good conversations, with good advice, with good stories, whatever. Do we do it on a consistent basis? Because if it's not consistent, it's really hard for people to keep excited about it. And then, is the quality good still? Like, are we constantly making the quality good or better every week or every other week? And then continuing on that trajectory up, And if you keep doing that and then also looking for this is what we could do to be even better, like maybe it's we go to, I don't know, we somehow, I don't even like to say this because it scares me. It's like we go on location, like you never know. But it's always continuing that trajectory up because there's no such thing as horizontal in anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like a plane without power goes down.
Yeah.
And you're either going up. I mean, this is kind of a business principle, I feel like. Is like you're either going up or going down. And I think the same goes for success also, which really that's what a lot of what we're talking about is you're either going up or you're going down.
Mm-hmm.
And so ideally we're always going up, we're always building that enthusiasm, we're always building those conversations and building people up. And Daps does the same thing. So as influencing magic grows, Daps is growing. We've got some other projects they're in the works that are getting vetted by different people as well. And then running with it. And I think it's also being okay to fail.
Yeah.
Like some things just won't work.
It's big and scary, but that's true.
Yeah. And like I have another thing that we're working on for Daps that's kind of in the beta testing phase, and there's a very distinct possibility that it will fail. However, I'm okay with the failure because I'm also not okay with the status quo. And so, I think status quo is, there's a thing I hadn't thought of till just now that's called the curse of mediocrity.
Okay.
And it's this thing I came up with in college that I realized. Yeah.
College thoughts with Mr. Daps.
Yeah, basically. But I realized mediocrity is always a curse. And when you get into it, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where the mediocrity becomes more mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is that curse of mediocrity of they just try to keep things going at the same level, whether it's an organization or a person or whatever. And at the end of the day, it's just boring and dead and whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing really great. Like there isn't anything good that comes out of mediocrity. Like it always ends up to a downfall. And so it's one of those things I've always been very cognizant of is like, let's avoid the curse of mediocrity at all costs. And if it's mediocrity, we either fix it or we get rid of it.
Yeah.
And so that's in my mind as well as we're moving forward.
That's
Did I
good.
answer the question? I kind of went all over the place.
It's okay. No, I think you did. I think basically from if I can interpret what you're saying.
Yes.
You should always keep striving forward.
Yep.
To new and better things.
Yep.
Don't be afraid to fail.
Yep.
And basically like find the creative people that are around you and use that as a sounding board for your creative endeavors. And this doesn't even have to be creative. It could be anything. Just find that core group of people that you trust. And as you go through your new endeavors and experiences, bring those people with you. And
it's more fun that way too.
Yeah. Let the influence of you also influence the people around you, and it'll come back to you. So.
One of the things I like to say too that I got from a mentor of mine is if you're not having fun, you're done. and I think that is so true as you're looking forward to whatever it is you want to be influential with too, is pick something that you want to do that at the end of the day it makes you smile. And you felt good because you did it or whatever it is. And like it's very apparent how much you enjoy creating stuff artistically. Like you can tell you're having fun.
Yeah.
And I think
that's what it should be.
Yeah. And I think anybody that bumps into us in the parks or comes to one of our shows when we used to have actual people watching us, we have a lot of fun with what we do. Like at the end of the day, like Daps is fun, influencing magic's fun, Geeks Corner's fun, everything we do is fun, Caption of the Week. And that's really like, that comes down to the why. Like your why shouldn't be because I want to torture myself and get through this terrible thing because it's going to make me a better person. Maybe true, but why not have a little fun doing it too?
Yeah. Influencing fun and influencing joy in what you're doing in your everyday endeavors.
That is true.
So, yeah.
Do we do it?
I think that's a good word.
Very good. I'm off the hot seat.
If you guys have any questions for Mr. Daps, I know you can't really do anything on the audio versions of this, but if you have questions, this will be up on YouTube. Feel free to come over to dapsmagic.com and write any questions that you may have, any comments. We would love to continue this conversation about your origin stories or what you guys have done to take steps into going forth in your own endeavors and projects and creative outlets. So with that...
And we can tease next time.
Oh, yeah.
So next time, we're going to do the exact same thing, but you don't have to hear from me. You get to hear from Annie, and it's going to be fun to hear. I think I'm actually going to learn a lot from this, too. I don't know. Maybe you learned something about me, too, today. I don't know.
I did.
But, okay.
I don't know if I would tell you otherwise.
You never know. We've known each other a while. But yeah, we're going to do you next week. It'll be a lot of fun. And if you want to know more about both of us, and really, like, you can connect with us on social media. We've got a great team. We got Roger helping us out. We've got Caitlyn helping us out with particularly social media. But you can also join our Patreon, and that's kind of where we go deeper on these things. Well, it is where we go. It's not kind of. That is where we go deeper. And you can help influencing magic there as well, as we kind of feel our way into what this is going to feel like on a every show basis, because we're still at this early phase. We're not into a routine yet.
Yeah.
We're still feeling this out a little bit, and which means this is a very good time to be like, hey, it'd be a really cool idea, and we'll be like, what? And we'll listen to it, and maybe we'll do it, maybe we won't. You never know.
Don't always have to take the advice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the place to really to do that. And what else? Was there something else I'm supposed to talk about? I don't remember.
You gave shout-outs already.
I did give shout-outs.
And I think I said something about dapsmagic.com. A safe and positive place to find Disney news, resources, and community is where our home will be on YouTube. So if you are interested in watching the visual parts of this, you can head on over to the Daps Magic YouTube. And that's where you will find all of us, hopefully under the podcast section that is new on YouTube. We're still figuring that out. But yeah, I think that's it. I think that concludes our second episode of Influencing Magic. Thank you guys so much for being here with us.
Make it a great day, everybody, and be kind.